everyone. Today I am so excited because I get to talk to Kate Moore, and she's an author, among other things, but she just recently released this book called The Radium Girls. And, Kate, I can't even tell you what this book has done for me, and thank you so much for talking to me. I mean, like I said, you did other things because you've written plays and you've directed, and this is just one of the things you've done, but I am just so blessed to be able to talk to you.
Oh, well, it's my honour and privilege to be speaking with you. Thank you so much for wanting to get the word out there about, these amazing women that I've written about in my book. They're the superstars, and I'm so grateful to you for wanting to give them a voice and a platform.
It's interesting because recently I feel like I've been reading so many books about women in the early 1900s that we didn't know about. And, we have this, I'm in Pennsylvania, which, well, maybe you don't know, but I'm right next to New Jersey. New Jersey is only a couple of miles from me. And we in America, we look at those women back then and we think that they didn't contribute and that they were I shouldn't say they didn't contribute. They didn't contribute in the workforce. We thought of them as moms and housewives, and, you didn't hear too much about them. But recently, it's just been coming out, lots of books have been coming out about these women, and this is just one of them. And what I love about this was these weren't necessarily women. These were women before they were thinking about marriage and being, moms and that kind of thing. So this kind of takes on a little bit different, but I had no idea. Okay. I pick up this book. I see it's about women. I can't believe. It's sad. It's sad that I can live so close to New Jersey, live in America, not know anything about this. It's just, it's just unbelievable for what they have done for our country,
Absolutely, but as you say, it's a kind of classic example of women being silenced and, things being covered up and the voices not being heard. And, that was my motivation for writing the book, because I couldn't believe that, there are other books that have been written about the Radium Girls, but not one that kind of delves into the lives of these women, these, extraordinary, ordinary women who kind of, just got up every day, went to work, loved their children, loved their husbands, and particularly, as you say, that a lot of them were teenagers when they started. So they were just, this was a job to kind of see them into their future and things like that. And for me, it was the humanity of the Radium Girls that I wanted to bring to light in the book, basically, and so that readers could discover them and discover their characters.
Yeah, and I love that's what you gave them. You gave them a face and a name, and, what I picture is like my great-grandmothers who, when I see these pictures, because I go right to the pictures. I love pictures in books. So before I even know the story, I'm looking at these women and I'm like, wait a second, these don't look like my grandmother, because my family was poor. They're in Jersey. They're not doing much better at that, but they have on these furs.
Yeah.
And they're dressed way different. So my first initial was like, what were they, this is really interesting. And then as I, go through the story, I realized that they aren't getting paid a little bit of money for that time. They're getting paid a good amount of money. And I was wondering, as I'm reading it, and I'm thinking, why were they getting paid? Were they getting paid that much? Because they didn't acknowledge that what they were doing was necessarily dangerous.
No, quite the opposite. When the Radium Girls asked the companies, does it hurt us? Their managers said no. They said they were perfectly safe. So, a couple of people said to me, was it hazard pay? Is that why the dial painters were in the top 5% of female wage earners nationally? And the simple answer is, well, if it was hazard pay, they certainly didn't tell the girls about it, because the girls were assured time and again that radium was safe. And obviously that was the message perpetuated by the companies. When the lawsuits start up, when the girls start getting sick, the companies are saying, no, it's not dangerous. So if it was hazard pay, no one was describing it as that. I think really the reason they were getting paid so much and why no one really questioned it is because radium itself was so lucrative. At the time we're talking about, First World War, it's the most expensive substance on Earth, $2.2 million for a single gram. That's the equivalent in today's values. And so I think anyone associated with with it, whether you're a celebrity that's kind of drinking the radium water from that time as a kind of health tonic, or whether you're a dial painter working with that magical, mystical substance, you get paid a lot because the substance itself is lucrative. In the same way that I think, today if people work in the gem industries, with sapphires and diamonds, it's got a kind of associated glamour, and I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect directors of those gem companies are well paid because the gems themselves are, expensive. I think it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah, that they didn't question, and maybe I should back up a little bit because I didn't know anything about this, so I think we should explain it a little bit to everybody. Sure. Is that these there were these radium watches and dials. Radium illuminates like this.
Yeah, glows in the dark.
Glows in the dark. So around 1917 or so, they start producing these dials. Dials for what?
For all sorts of things. So it dials for aeronautical purposes. Okay, so for ships, for aeroplanes, for trucks.
Okay, all right. So that's their contribution to the World War I. Is not only just the watches, but the dials for the different instruments that they were using.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as you say, these women, the Radium Girls, were contributing to the war effort, and that's why a lot of them joined the studios and wanted to work. Grace Fryer joined because her brothers had gone to fight in France, and she wanted to do her bit for the war effort.
Right. And just so everybody understands too what they're doing. Okay, so they're painting, but the brushes are too thick for the numbers on the dial or whatever they were putting on the dial. So I was trying to envision this. I really was, because as I'm reading it, I'm like trying to envision what they're doing. Because so they're dipping. Are they licking it and then dipping it, but then re-licking it, or was it a dip and then re-licking the brush to a point?
They had to put it as a point before they applied it.
Okay. So
that would have been the last stage of the thing.
Okay.
I think it's one of those things that they were kind of constantly, because they would do it kind of, many of them kind of put it in the mouth 2 times per number, some of them said. Mm-hmm. So it was a kind of dip, lip, whatever needed to kind of get that neat handiwork for the tiny numbers, which sometimes were only a single millimetre in width. So you can imagine why they needed to get a fine point.
Yeah, and you can imagine that during that time, the instruments, like they were just trying to get the cheapest amount, because of what they were doing. And they're like, oh, well, I think you put it in the book, like they were like, well, the girls can just dip it in their mouth and lick it, and twist it. Or somebody figured it out that was the way to make the tip very fine.
Yeah, it came from China painting factories originally, because the original girls who were hired as radium dial painters originally were painting China. And with the watercolour paint, there wasn't really any harm because it was water-based. But obviously with radium, a radioactive substance, putting a brush laden with that in your mouth has devastating consequences, which the girls didn't know at the time.
Right. And you build this story up, like, the first chapter, I'm like, already, I'm like, oh my goodness, what's to come. And the way you build it up as they're finding out, because, they have no idea. And then one girl, like, starts losing a tooth. And then all of a sudden, all her teeth are cut. And the way you build the suspense, I have to tell you, for anybody who is going to read this book, it is not for the light of heart. It is honest, and it is serious. And I would put it down at night and go, to take a breath.
Yeah,
because
it's gruesome what happens to them, but I felt very strongly that I didn't want to kind of shy away from that. I thought kind of the women deserved us to bear witness to what they went through and really understand the horror of it, of the teeth coming out, of the radium, settling in their jawbones, so the jawbones splinter. It is horrific stuff, but it is what happened to them. And for me, it was important not to kind of couch it in, simple terms. I wanted to describe it so readers could really, understand the horror of it and understand the strength of the women in fighting despite the fact that their bodies were falling apart. Because I think you have renewed kind of respect for them, understanding just how incredible that courage was.
Yeah, because it takes like up to 5 years for the symptoms basically to set in. This isn't something that they show up, they get sick, and they're like, why are they being so stupid? They keep getting sick. It's not like that. Radium isn't like that. It's something that takes a while. And then by the time these girls are starting to show symptoms, nobody's putting it to what they're doing. Or they're not connecting dots. Maybe other people in the company were connecting dots, but they weren't connecting dots until finally somebody started connecting a dot to it and saying, wait a second.
Yeah, and it was, the girls who kind of first noticed it. 'Cause obviously, these women, a lot of them, one of the tragedies for me is that because it was such a lucrative job, because everyone wanted to be a dial painter, these women recommended the job to their sisters, to their cousins, to their friends. So you have whole sets of siblings, lining up along the wooden benches that they used to paint at. And therefore, when they start getting sick, even though, as you say, no one is connecting the dots, radium at that time was seen as this really beneficial substance, surely it can't be hurting them. But it's the women who realise, well, I'm getting sick, my sister's getting sick, our neighbour across the street is getting sick, her sister is sick. And it was, they were the ones that started ruminating about that and really kind of starting to probe those connections. It was the kind of friendship networks that really tied them together. And, this was a group effort. It is a group fight for justice and so altruistic for that reason as well.
Yeah, and I think what I found so amazing about this was, because I was thinking this even before I read it and watched the videos of you, that so they're in this building and it's got all this radium in it and stuff, and then they bury these women, and these women are coming home and they've got radium all over them, and I started to think, wait a second, it's not just about them, they're infecting everybody they're coming in contact with. And I guess when they start digging the bodies up and they're realizing these women are they're dead and their bodies are giving off radium. That to me was just, did that hit you as any, wow? That's
yes, the fact that we're only 100 years on. It's 2017. We're 100 years on from where the book opens with 14-year-old Catherine Sharp going to work. We're only 100 years on, but radium has a half-life of 1,600 years.
Wow.
So we've barely scratched the surface of how radioactive these women are and are going to remain. And it was really powerful for me. I remember when I'm describing the death of one of the Radium Girls in the book, and I'm talking about how the radium is bombarding her body and that's what has led to her downfall. I write, it's bombarding her body to this day. Even as you and I are sitting here having a Skype chat, her body is still, her bones, skeleton are still being, bombarded by those rays. It's still in there. And that is extraordinary that it has this legacy, that they're still being affected,
Yeah. And so when I was watching your video, what I found so heartwarming about you was that you said that as you were writing their story, you put their pictures up because you really wanted to tell, like you said, their story was told as a clump. They were these Radium Girls, and nobody knew who they were, and nobody, they didn't know exactly what they went through. But you felt such a deep connection to them to tell their story personally. I was like, oh, that is so, that's just so amazing to me on a spiritual level, that they're, that it didn't get forgotten,
Yeah. And I think, I felt that when I started, researching the book, but having met the families of these women, who I interviewed for the book, who very generously shared with me photographs of their relatives, so some of those pictures that you described that I had up around my desk, there was a picture of Peg Looney, aged 8, with her grandparents, her grandmothers, which her family had shared with me. And I think, because they were willing to let me into their lives, I really felt able to get to know these girls much better, girls who are long dead, but something about them, as you say, just spiritually connected with me. And it was a labour of love in many ways, because no one had ever traced the individual stories to know, exactly how many appointments did this particular Radium Girl had, where did she feel it first? And to trace that with the different women, to know that Grace Fryer felt it in her foot first, to know that for Quinton MacDonald it was in her hip. And I wanted to do that because each girl had a story.
Right.
And, if it was you who was suffering, or if it was me, we would each have our own journey and our own experience, and it would be personal and intimate and important to us that individual, that individual story was our experience of being a Radium Girl. And that's what I wanted to do for these individual women. As you say, they were a clump. If anyone knew of them in the history books, which not, as you say, it's not a widely known story,
right.
That's what you got. You got a clump. You didn't get Grace Fryer, age 27, got fitted with a back brace. And that's what I wanted to bring to light, their individual journeys.
Yeah, and I was on vacation last week or the week before, and I'm reading your book, and doing some of my research on it and stuff, and anybody that came within, I'm like, did you ever hear? You got to hear the story, And after a while, people are like, oh my God, I don't want to hear the story anymore. I'm like, I know, but it's so awesome. And I'm thinking, is that kind of what you went through too? Where you, as you were finding stuff out, you were like, oh my God, you got to hear this, and people were like, no, I don't, because that is what we do. That is the natural thing. We hear something so tragic that we're like, oh no, I don't want to hear how, but I became just as involved with these women as as you were, because I'm reading about them and I'm looking up their stories, and I ran out of people that I wanted to hear about it.
yeah, I think you do. Well, thank you so much for doing that. As I say, that's partly why I wrote the book. I wanted people to know about them, and you are perpetuating that. The thing that I started, the kind of the match that I lit.
Yes.
You're helping that story to spread. So thank you, because I want everyone to know about them. I just think what they went through was extraordinary. I just think the nature of the story itself, the fact, as you say, that they get poisoned when they're so young and happy and innocent, and it slowly degrades their bodies, and yet these women do not just take it lying down. They stand up and they fight, and they're so strong, and that kind of juxtaposition of their bodies falling apart, even as their spirits are the strongest they have perhaps ever been, because these women are digging deep to fight against, corporate greed, against lies, against a cover-up, against all the authorities, and even their neighbours and communities, battling against them, doing them down, shunning them, telling them they're liars and cheats and frauds. And yet these women keep fighting on because they're so determined that the truth will out and that they will protect the people that come after them. And as I say, I just think they're amazing, and I want everyone to know about them.
Yes. And, I read a lot of World War I and World War II historical fiction and history books. And I was thinking, they have their place in history. You have all these war heroes, and they're very celebrated for what they do. But the women contributed to the war effort also. And what they can, like you said, like some of them were like, well, what can I do? Because the women are left behind, and they're thinking, well, what can we do? Well, these girls actually thought they were, and they were. I mean, they didn't just think it. They actually were helping in the war effort. And, I just think of them as heroes too,
Yeah, and I think they're heroes as well in terms of their legacy, because, yes, the Radium Girls were poisoned and they died, but in dying, in that sacrifice, they left a legacy. So in radiation industries today, I've actually had several emails from people that either work in radiation industries, or the readers, their daughters or their sons work in radiation industries. And they just say, I am so grateful to the Radium Girls, because thanks to them, I or my son or daughter, wears a badge that measures how much radiation they're exposed to, so that you can check the safe levels. And the Radium Girls were really, they set the standards. The first kind of radioactive safety standards for radiation industries were based directly on the bodies of the Radium Girls. They measured them to find out how much radium they had taken in, and to try and work out what is a safe level. And for me, as I say, that legacy is just extraordinary, because they have saved, millions of lives, not just through those protective measures, but also in terms of the scientific knowledge that has come up. I talk in the epilogue briefly about how the women were studied in the 1950s when the nuclear arms race was going on, because people were, letting off nuclear bombs.
Right.
And we didn't know what was happening with the fallout, and it was actually thanks to the studies on the Radium Girls that we finally twigged, it's probably not a good idea to be letting off all these nuclear bombs. And in part that is partly why President Kennedy signed the Limited Test Ban Treaty.
Right.
And so, as I say, these girls have saved millions of lives, and I think that legacy their sacrifice was not in vain.
Right.
They gave up their lives, but they have protected so many other people who came after them.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, as I'm reading it, and I know you're British, okay, because I did my research, and so I kept waiting for like London to come in somehow, like because I'm like, how did this British woman know about, So I did find out that answer, but I thought you could tell everybody because I know, but not everybody knows.
Yeah. Well, as you say, I am British. I live 4,000 miles away from Ottawa, Illinois, where I first discovered the story. And I discovered the Radium Girls story through a play. There's a beautiful play called These Shining Lives by Melanie Marnich. And I stumbled on it, really, just by Googling great plays for women. I was looking for a play to direct and wanted one with strong female parts and that sort of thing. And Melanie's play came up on a Google search. And I fell in love with it from the first moment I read it, wanted to put it on, got the rights to put it on. And I always, as a director and as an actor, I'm all about the backstory. Right. So I wanted to know exactly, who these women were. I knew they were real women. I knew this was a true story. Mm-hmm. And so I read everything I could find. As I say, there are other books written on the Radium Girls. I read those. And fantastic as they are, and they were brilliantly helpful for my research, they are focused on the science or the legal, the incredible legal legacy in terms of workers' rights that the Radium Girls left behind. But as I say, there was no book that was about the women, and so that was why I was inspired to write the book, even though I'm British, and I just thought if no one else has done it, we're 100 years on, why don't I do it? Because I feel a connection with these girls, and I think they deserve to have a platform for their own voices to be heard, for those personal stories to be heard. And that's how the book came to be, basically.
Yeah, and I love historical fiction writers because, and this is not fiction. I love nonfiction and fiction because you can always sense their heart in it. Because there's so many stories out there. I mean, you can write fiction, and I love good fiction, but man, there are so many stories out there that are not fiction that need, that need a voice and need to be told. And as we're reading it, we're learning about something that actually happened. And I stumbled upon this too. It's really strange. I mean, I'm just like searching through history books. This pops up, and I was like, I've heard of that, but I don't know why. And then I read it, I was like, and it touched me so much. I mean, your writing I felt like I was there. I love your writing. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I really do. And this story is so heartwarming, and I felt so connected to them. And that's what it does. It connects us because we all are connected in some way. And it made it, and like I said, Jersey's like right there, it's not, it's not far from me,
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? It is so close. It's close in terms of geography, it's close in terms of history, and it's close in terms of humanity. These were ordinary people. It could have happened to any one of us.
It could have happened, right. So, okay, you put your, everything into this book. How long did it take you to write it?
Whenever I give this answer, people are always surprised, but I always caveat it by saying I work weekends and 18-hour days. It took me about 4 months to research it, and I wrote it in a month. But I write really quickly.
That is crazy. I always thought you were going to say, okay, so I researched for 5 years, then I wrote it for a year. I mean, that is seriously, in the terms of this kind of research and writing, and this is no shy book. I mean, we're talking, this isn't like a 100-page book. This is very detailed. So that is very impressive. And so you get done with this and you're doing the publicity and you take a deep breath, and then now what? Like, what are you going to, do you have something else? Or do you just have to do you need a moment to get away from?
I'm a professional writer, so I write books for a living. That's what I do, and so I also work as a ghostwriter. So I've actually written quite a few books since I finished Radium Girls, but not one that is that big history book. And so I'm very keen to find another historical or another kind of real story that I can do justice to. So I would like to find that in my future. But for the moment, I'm working on ghostwriting projects, and that's a whole range of different genres, which is very exciting. So I had a book that was a kind of true crime book called Catching a Serial Killer. which came out in June in the UK. And I published another book that was about a cat, just a heartwarming, heartwarming, funny stories about a cat. So I'm very versatile. I write lots of different things. But as I say, I would love to find something else that is in the same genre as the Radium Girls, but I don't yet know what story that is. And I think because their story was so close to my heart, whatever the story is, I want to try and find something that I connect with. It won't be in the same way because there was something so special about these women. But I hope it's something that I feel equally as connected to, and it's kind of, I don't know if empowered is the right word, but feeling that passion for it, that I have to tell this story and I have to get it out there. That's what I would like. And I think I'd just add on the fact that I mentioned I'm a ghostwriter. In a way, that's kind of how I approach the women's story as well, because for me it was all about giving them a voice.
Right.
And that's what I do when I'm ghostwriting. I interview people and then I help them, for their words and their message to come to the fore in the form of a book. And for me, that's kind of what I did for the Radium Girls. I was like their ghostwriter.
I love
because
that.
it was filled with their first person quotes, and it was just about bringing those together and, kind of being a midwife to let their message, be born into the world, basically.
Yeah, and it seems like, I'm the reader, you're the writer, but I kind of do the same thing with books. So I read this, and then it's like I back away and go to a novel, like a lighthearted, romantic, I don't know, it's very strange, but it is how our mind kind of, because this is deep, okay, this is very personal and very deep, and you feel, it makes you feel things, and then you're like done with it, and I'm like, and I go right to the next book because that's what I do. But I go to something like, oh, I think I'll read something cute and funny and romantic, and something completely opposite. Yeah. Not that I go back for another because I need a deep breath. So
Well, it's almost, you need to kind of do that. You can't, it would be variety is the spice of life and all that. You wouldn't want to read the same book over and over and over again. And you don't want to write the same book over and over and over again. You want to find different stories that have different narratives, and, readers want that as well. They want to discover different stories.
Yeah, and this book, so everybody knows, this has hit the New York Times bestseller in the UK. Yeah. And the U.S., which I didn't know until I read about it today. And
it did. Radium Girls didn't hit the bestseller list in the UK. There are other books of mine that are bestsellers in the UK.
When did it come out in the UK?
It came out in June 2016.
So maybe it will. It has time.
Maybe it will. Yeah, there's still time.
I just prophesized that it will. So I just said it, so it will. But, that the attention you're getting from this is just, I'm so happy for you. Really happy for you.
I'm overwhelmed, but for me, it's not about me. It's about the girls. The reason it's getting so much attention, the reason you fell in love with them and fell in love with the book, the reason the book is on the New York Times bestseller list is because of the women. Their story is just so extraordinary. Their courage was just so incredible. That is what readers are connecting with, and I'm just so proud of them and so proud for them that after all the years and all the distrust they suffered and people not believing them, the fact that their own nation now is celebrating them, is embracing them for the heroines that they truly are. I'm just so pleased for them and pleased for their families. Some of the family members I interviewed were in their 80s and 90s. They remembered the way the women were shunned. Their relatives talked about it. It was understandably a kind of sore point. And for me, I just think it's wonderful that, as I say, they're being celebrated now. That it is getting the attention that it's getting. That people are just thinking, wow, these girls, these women were off the scale amazing, and that is what I'm most proud of, that they've done this.
Yeah, and when I was watching a lecture you had given, and you actually got so emotional reading the first part of this book, and so that's what I was like, see, this meant so much to you. This wasn't about you just writing a story about these women. These women touched you. And I feel like if you wrote it that quickly, I really feel like it was inspired writing. It had to just flow off your pen, because I know it's about these girls, but you are, I mean, your writing is so, it draws you into their lives, and only you could have done it. And I feel like you were very inspired to do it. And I'm so happy that you did. I really am. I'm glad you brought them into my life, and I will always share this book and, you know, anything that you write, but
thank you. That means so much to me. Honestly, I can't tell you how much it does. I mean, I'm just so, I mean, it's been incredible for me. Obviously, it's amazing to have a book on the New York Times bestseller list, and I'm just so thankful to the girls, because I couldn't have done it without them. There was just something about this story and them.
I know. I feel like, you know, in a very spiritual sense, again, like they gave it to you. They gave you their stories, and you know, and it means so much. But here is the cover. It is an amazing cover. I love hardback books. I always buy hardbacks. See if I can get the glare off. But thank you so much, Kate. This is the Radium Girls. I will have all of Kate's links on the bottom and the link to get your book. And thank you. Thank you for talking.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Have a great day. Night for you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.